Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
In Studio 2, I've got the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council, Matthew Dickerson, on the line. Hello, Matthew.
Yeah, g'day, Tony. Thanks for talking to me again. It's always good to catch up after our council meetings and standing committee meetings to give you and your listeners an update on what's happening.
Yeah, so we're talking about the standing committee meeting last night and some of the expectations and outcomes that might have occurred there. So what do you have to report on the various things there? So we've got the Tony McGrain Scholarship. I know the winner has been announced for that.
Yeah, that's right. And that wasn't specifically from the meeting last night. That was actually earlier on this week where we had the Tony McGrain Scholarship. Emma Solomon was the winner of that award, and obviously that's in recognition of former Mayor of Dubbo and also former state member for Dubbo, Tony McGrain.
Yeah.
And that's a scholarship dinner that's held every 2 years to raise money for that scholarship. So that's always great. But it was actually interesting. I had dinner with the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Renee Leon, and the discussion there was all about the strength of CSU in the community and making sure we've got that in the community to continue on with that strength. And I think that's really important, Tony, because it's great that you've got the ability to have a university education in a regional area. But what they found during the pandemic was, I think Charles Sturt did a really good job during the pandemic in delivering remote learning, but they're actually having a problem now where it was so good with that remote learning that many people, even in Dubbo, even in Wellington, are living in Dubbo and Wellington, but choosing not to actually go to the on-campus form of education. They're still doing it remote, even though they might be only a few kilometres away from the campus, stay in their pyjamas, stay in their bed if they like, and do some of their study without going into the campus. So the campus isn't as vibrant as it was before the pandemic. That's a bit of a challenge for Charles Sturt University to address. They're still educating people, but it'd be nice to see a bit more vibrancy around that campus.
Well, that's interesting. Now, one thing that is always on the radar here in Wellington, and that is the current goings-on with the Dubbo Regional Livestock Markets. So the planning workshop is in place to address issues with that and improve things. So how's that all going?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, Tony. The livestock markets, as best we can investigate or find out, started way back in about the early 1950s. Now, that was when Talbragar Shire Council owned the sale yards, and that was a donut council around Dubbo City Council. So it all started back then, and I don't know what those agreements looked like. There were probably a couple of handshakes that were done back in those days. Then, of course, you had an amalgamation in 1980 between Dubbo City Council and Talbragar Shire Council. And again, those agreements were in place probably verbally, just continued on. And we're now in the year 2023 after another amalgamation. And it's one of the things that's pretty important where we're at with the current environment and the operating environment of those livestock markets. We've now got some new rules that have been introduced, some new guidelines that came out last year from the Office of Local Government. You've got the whole chain of responsibility from paddock to plate. You've got animal welfare and animal health and safety of animals there. You've got anti-competition laws. So it's pretty fair to say, Tony, that things have changed pretty dramatically from 1950 odd till 2023. So we're really looking at that whole operation. Is it operating within all these guidelines, within the parameters of how we should be operating? Do we need to make some changes to the operating model there to make sure we're complying with all the current updates and current guidelines? I haven't got an answer for you on that. We're still going through and looking at all that. We'll have to have some discussions with the stock and station agents and really just refine that model. But it's one of the things that councils should always do, look at all of their operations and make sure they're doing or operating those in the best possible way for the best outcomes for ratepayers.
Okay. And also, council's been looking at the Regional Cities Bus Services Improvement Program. And Transport for New South Wales, of course, runs that. So my understanding, of course, is that the Wellington service, the town service, is integrated into that plan. Is that right?
The plan there is only related to Dubbo because they're talking about 16 regional cities. And this is a really tricky one, Tony. The state government said to us some time ago, we're going to improve bus services across 16 regional cities, Dubbo being one of those. And we said, that sounds fantastic because in places like Dubbo, if you haven't got a car or you can't walk to where you're going, it's pretty hard to get around. The public transport isn't something that's used a lot. And so we said, that's fantastic. And so they've gone ahead with that program and working through that program. But as part of that program, they're then now putting in more bus stops, whereas in the past it's been a bus service that you just wave down a bus. So they're putting in more bus stops, and that's prompted a number of inquiries that I've had from residents saying, why are you putting a bus stop in the front of my place? I don't want a bus stop there. Of course, the part of the problem there we have is that we don't decide where the bus stops go. We don't actually control that program. That's all controlled by the state government. So that makes it quite difficult because people naturally come to council often and talk about what they want council to do, but we aren't in control of that. But it went through to our standing committee meeting last night in terms of more or less a notation. It's really the state government telling council what they're doing and asking us to basically tick it off. We can't really say we don't want bus stops in those locations, or can you change that? Some of the people that have complained to me have said that the letters they've received from Transport for New South Wales have basically said there's a exclusion zone before and after the bus sign, and you can't park there 24 hours a day. So it means if I've got a bus stop out the front of my house and I've got a friend coming around tonight to have dinner with me, well, you can't park out the front of my place because you'll get a fine. Go and park in front of the neighbour's place, and then the neighbour says to me, well, why are all your friends coming and parking in front of my place? I don't want them parking in front of my place. So that's caused a bit of angst. There's something like 72 bus stops that they've got in the information that came through our standing committee last night. Some of those are existing bus stops, some of them are new, some of them are in CBD area, so that makes sense. But the residential ones are the ones that have been causing a problem. The main message here is that the letter that comes from Transport for New South Wales has some contact details on there. Take advantage of that, send an email off, make a phone call and talk to Transport for New South Wales. The problem is that if you say, I don't want it in front of my place, and it moves 100 metres up the road, well, the next person says, I don't want it in front of my place. So it is a bit of a NIMBY problem as well.
Okay. All right, I see that Western Regional Planning Panel, I take it that's a state government organisation, has dropped $35.7 million into Dubbo to in the way of establishing a building to house 700 public servants. That's a lot of dough to be dropping in, isn't it?
Well, it is, and there's an existing building in Dubbo now in Carrington Avenue, an office block, much smaller than the one that has been proposed there. So this is the state government trying to consolidate 24 different sites around Dubbo into one main site. Now, the Western Regional Planning Panel was the consent authority, not council in this case. There are different triggers that send projects to the Western Region Planning Panel. Sometimes it might be the fact that the state government's doing it. Sometimes it might be the dollar value. But this one particularly was a $5.7 million construction that will occur. That'll be 5 stories of office blocks. There'll be 2 underground basement car parking, if you like, on there. So that'll be a major construction in Carrington Avenue there. Again, there's a fairly big building now, but that'll be replaced by a very large building there. That will be something that, well, it's approved now. It'll be up to the state government now to basically start that construction. Yes, we've had a change of government. This had all started in the last term of government. I can't see any reason why the new government wouldn't go ahead with that. It makes sense to consolidate all those staff in one building, and it also will free up a bit of office real estate around Dubbo where those office workers, where those state government workers are currently.
Okay. Now, I've had lots of questions heading my way from residents and people in Wellington about the state of affairs with the Duke of Wellington Bridge, and another issue which is they're curious about is about the funding arrangements for the Mitchell Creek Bridge along Saxa Road. So what's the progress there, Matthew?
So I'll give you an update on both of those separately. Duke of Wellington, we're still waiting at the moment for the engineering investigations to be completed in relation to the bridge. So as you know, the riverbank on the Wellington town side of the Duke of Wellington Bridge has collapsed, erosion from the river, from the Bell River, and so you can't access that bridge now. The first thing we're doing is looking at the actual bridge, the construction of the bridge. Is that still safe? If we do anything else with it, is that safe? If it's not safe, then we'll take one course of action. If it is safe, then we'll have some other choices. Me, not having any engineering reports to go by, but me personally, I think the bridge will probably be in a reasonable condition and probably will be safe. Then it will be a big decision to make whether or not we try and restore the entrance roadway there to a standard that could have vehicular traffic on it again and basically open up the Duke of Wellington. That will come with a significant price tag, I would imagine. Again, I don't have those bits of information at the moment, that we haven't completed any of these investigations. But the other options might be that we might turn it into a walkway. We might do something with it. We could even knock it down. So we'll have a lot of choices. But before we make any of those decisions, we've really got to get the information back about the structure of that bridge. So that's Duke of Wellington. So not a lot to update there. When you go,
can I just interrupt there? One of the things that they're really bringing home is the increased traffic along Montague Street and the congestion that's happening with the intersection there with the highway. So it's put a load of traffic onto that area, and that's one of the main reasons why people are asking what's happening with the Duke of Wellington Bridge. Because obviously, if nothing happens with the bridge, then you've got another problem to sort out, and that's probably going to cost money too.
And that's all those decisions will need to be made once we get that information back. So whether or not we go ahead and restore that, that'll come down to a simple process of the dollars versus the benefits, and that'll be the decision to be made. And again, as you know, when we've got people screaming out for road repairs across the entire LGA, and again, I'm making up numbers here, but let's say we had to spend $5 million on restoring the entrance there, the roadway there. Is that the best place to spend $5 million across the LGA as opposed to maybe fixing roads elsewhere? So that'll be all those tough decisions that councillors will have to make once we get that information back from the engineers in the first instance, and some costings as well.
Okay.
So the other one,
so
Mitchell Creek. So
Creek,
as you know, the process out there, what we've said to the residents there, and the last meeting that we were at, the public meeting was out there, essentially we said that we're going to have to build a bridge, and I've had some updates through from our staff in terms of some of those designs. For example, we've got the completion now of the study, the assessment there, to basically work out the deck height of the bridge. So we needed to come up with a deck height that would keep that above the water for most floods that went through there, not every flood. So basically the deck level that we've come to would keep that deck above the water, and anything below a 1 in 100 year flood, a 1 in 100 year flood would basically just get to that deck level. So basically most of the floods that we see are below that level, so it would keep the deck above that. So that's good. So that basically means at the moment, every time in the old culvert out there, every time there was a sprinkle of rain, it seemed like that culvert was very difficult to pass. So that'll be a big improvement there. There's some geotech reports being done at the moment just to get some of that assessment about how the bridge would be constructed. And we expect by the end of June to have the bridge design completed and where the pylons will need to go for that. So some of the reports from the geotech report and where they'll go and the type of construction we'll need there. So that'll be the end of the design phase by the end of June. Then it'll be a matter of just working out the construction phase, going out to tender, all those things. In terms of funding, council, sure, we're always looking for grant funding, always looking for external funding, but we can't wait for this construction to occur until we get some of that funding, Tony. So we're going to go ahead. We'll have to fund that internally, more than likely, unless we get a grant at the last minute. But it's too important a road and too important a passing or crossing there to wait around to get some grant funding. We probably would get some grant funding, but it might delay the project by another 6 months, 12 months until we get some of that grant funding. So we're just going to have to go ahead and build that bridge with council's funds and obviously change other projects that we might have had funds set aside for.
Okay. Now, on the last topic, Matthew, there was a lot of funding has gone council's way from the federal government to do with the Binjang aerodrome and updating and upgrading the tarmac. So there has been a bit of tension and rumours going back to the last council in relation to the idea of closing that airport and consolidating everything in Dubbo. And I referred to a report in the Wellington and District Leader, this week's edition, saying pretty much that it says here that at one stage it was mooted from within the previous Dubbo Regional Council that the aerodrome could be sold off, and those rumours were seen to ensure the future viability and monopoly of Dubbo Airport. So the big question is, okay, what's the future direction now for the aerodrome as far as you're concerned?
There was a lot of discussion last year, Tony, around the aerodrome there. There were various stories that were thrown around, as you said, various rumours, if you like, and a whole range of different discussions occurred around what might happen there. Now, one of the things that was important, certainly in my opinion, and I think, to be fair, in the opinion of councils in general, was to make a decision about what we're going to do with Binjang Aerodrome or Binjang Airport, and then set that course and go forward with there. At that time, I think it would be fair to say that everything was on the table. And if you're having a discussion about an asset, then everything should be on the table. So the sale of that was on the table, leasing it out to some other organisation was on the table, closing it down as an airport and just having it for drag races, whatever, anything you could dream up was definitely on the table. Those discussions occurred. Councillors debated things back and forth. We looked at the costings of a whole range of things, looked at income streams, etc. And a final decision was made as the way to go forward. And that was not to sell it. So that was put to bed. We're not planning on selling Binjang Airport. We're not planning on leasing it out to any other organisation. What we did say is that the only way this can be viable and to make the best use of ratepayer funds, keeping in mind that I talk about it a lot, but I'm always focused on the best way to use your money, Tony, for the benefit of the overall community. The only way that it would be viable to continue to run that airport in some sort of form that wasn't going to be too expensive to the community was to have it as a multi-use facility. So that means that it'll be used as an airport most of the time. Sometimes, maybe once a month, it'll be closed down for drag races to occur there, and that means that for that day, then it will be closed down. So Mother's Day, coming up in a couple of days, will be a day where there'll be drag races there. So for that day, it's not going to be used as an airport, it'll be used for drag races. The Drag Race Club pays a reasonable sum of money to council for the use of that. People landing their planes on there, they pay a small sum of money to land their planes there. And then we've also got other options there. So, for example, we've got AMSL doing some testing there now. There's a hangar there. Other options for more hangars to be built there for other organisations to come out and use those facilities. By having that combined use, drag races, airport, leases and hangars and other activities there, we think we can get to the stage where it will be maybe not making money, but not losing too much money, but have a good community service there for the whole community. We also managed to get on the back of all of that. Once that decision was made, we then went out and said, we've got a position now and let's go and find some money. So we were successful in getting $350,000 out of the federal government. It had to be dollar for dollar match, so that'll need $350,000 of council money as well. And that money will go into improving the actual runway, making a different surface where the drag races are held to be able to accommodate those drag races so it won't do too much damage to the actual airstrip itself, and then putting a top seal on the other parts of the runway that aren't used by the drag races, and also fixing up a little bit of the apron area. So basically improving the facilities so long-term into the future, it'll be able to handle that multi-use. So that's a council resolution. That's the decision of council going forward. Sure, another council resolution could come in tomorrow, but it would be silly to do that now that we're going to spend $700,000 on that to go forward with the path that we've set forward going forward. So I think very unlikely that any council is going to bring forward an option to sell or to lease that out. There was enough discussion about it. I think that multi-use facility is how we'll use that facility going forward.
Yeah, okay. There is sort of a little bit of concern about the damage that the drag races do and the problems that it can create by putting stones up on the tarmac, which is dangerous for aircraft. And Andrew G basically said sections of the runway have been badly damaged, so getting it resurfaced will ensure air operators can land safely without damaging their aircraft. So the federal government is really focused on the airport and funding it from the point of view of transport. And he says getting these critical repairs done and dusted will boost connectivity between regional New South Wales communities, improve essential freight transport movements, and bolster emergency response capabilities, including aeromedical and aviation firefighting. So they're pretty important, and I think they are really the things that this community is really focused on. And I think that's what the council really does need to understand, that they seem to think that the idea of a multi-use facility could be good from the point of view of helping with the funding side of things, but obviously it has to be tempered with what really the main purpose of that facility is. So I think that needs to be tempered into the conversation.
Well, I think, put it this way, Tony, if we just reserve that to be an airport only with no other income streams from other operators, then it would be very hard for councillors to justify the expense of running that airport for the small amount of income we receive from airport usage. So the multi-use facility, what people have got to understand, I suppose, is the multi-use facility with different income streams for it is the way to keep it open. So it means that everyone's got it to use for the thing that they want to use it for, but they've got to share it. And I think that's a reasonable outcome, given the fact that I'm also making sure that we're focusing on the bottom line of council, because we don't want large drains on the finances of council making it hard for other services to continue.
Yeah, sure. I think everybody understands that, but I also think that they will look at it and say, okay, yeah, but there has to be a focus and within reason. So I guess that's where the argument starts and finishes. And we'll just have to wait and see what develops from there. And it's good having AMSL. I think it's called AMSL, isn't it? The
Correct.
Vertical takeoff and landing firm. That's aviation. So that's really good to have those sorts of organisations there. I think that's what the townspeople would like to see a lot more of, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And again, by having that as a multi-use facility, it means we can keep it open and give opportunities for a whole range of things. And again, in the world we live in, it's probably okay that we share things sometimes. And I think sometimes we just have to compromise a little bit to make sure that everyone can get most of what they want, if not everything that they want.
Okay, Matthew, you're running out of time. So thank you very much for taking the time and talking to the residents of Wellington today. Really appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. Great to chat, and we'll talk again in a couple of weeks' time after the council meeting.
Thanks, Matthew. And we've been talking to Matthew Dickinson, the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council on Binjang 91.5.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.